the funny thing, Eamon, even though you and I met in the CrossFit gym at some point, I don't remember the very first day I met you. However, I do distinctly remember whenever I first met you or saw you, I know you were like guest coaching or something, or you were visiting. And I was like, who the hell is this guy? Because not only are you a physical specimen yourself, but you carry yourself with so much confidence and self-assurance that it just, it's just emanating from you. And you're a super nice guy to boot. So the fact that I took a class, I think it was taking a class that you happened to be guest coaching, and you were a phenomenal coach. You are so self-assured, and you're so mature, you're so professional, and you're so kind and so funny. It's like, who the hell is this guy? This guy's amazing. So I do distinctly remember that was the impression that I had of you, even though I can't remember the moment where I actually shook your hand. So thank you so much for being here. We will get back around to the confidence piece, because that's just something that defines you in my mind. But at the moment, real briefly, so that we don't have to do it again, do you mind telling the listeners what you're doing right now with your collective health and wellness consulting company, and where people can find you or what you want them to engage with?
Yeah. So collective health and wellness is a combination of basically four tenets that are, to me, are probably the most important aspects of the whole person as it relates to personal wellness. It's very easy for companies to focus primarily on movement or steps or whatever, because it's measurable, repeatable, and you can see progress very easily. And nutrition, because once again, it's measurable, repeatable, and you can see the progress with the scale moving, right? Or with putting on weight, losing weight, whatever the goal may be. But I think two of the most important aspects that people miss out on is that the human factor that's involved in that. And the human factor to me is the sleep and the quality of people's sleep. We can go down a whole rabbit hole of why I feel sleep is important, but the basic gist of it is that every metabolic process that happens in your body is almost like turbocharged as you rest. And that goes all the way from your hormone production and distribution to, ridding the body and the brain of waste. We're talking about white and gray matter in the brain, and how when you're sleeping, it basically like washes over your brain in order to kind of like clear out some of that mess. And, if you have brain fog or anything like that, which I think I would venture a guess that like 70 people in the world have some form of brain fog that they're dealing with.
All the time.
Yeah, man. It reduces stress levels. Getting your hormones in balance is such an important aspect of all the other tenets. And then the last piece is the mental health aspect, or the mental resilience is what I like to call it. Because mental health has this like negative connotation of like, hey, I need to go see a therapist, which is totally fine. I've been seeing a therapist since I was probably 10 years old, and I'm 41. And it's for some people, it's not for other people, and that's totally fine. It's just a good way for me to kind of like download with somebody that's a non-judgmental person, but that will call me on my shit if I'm doing something wrong. Can I curse? I'm sorry.
Please do. Yeah.
Okay. That gets to my Navy days, right?
Yeah. I want my guests to feel comfortable being themselves. So by all means.
Great. And what I like to do with those aspects is kind of tie them all together, and, movement, nutrition, sleep, and mental resilience kind of create this basket that I like to think of, kind of weaving themselves together, because they're all intertwined to create that safety net of health and wellness for the whole person, right? It's very easy we see it in CrossFit all the time. It's very easy for us to say, hey, the prescription is this, and the workout is this, and the stimulus we're looking for is this, right? out of those three things, prescription, workout, stimulus, the thing that we need to focus most on is the stimulus, because that's different for every person. We are not robots. We are not, we're not the same. We're different. We have different experiences. We have different, our makeup is different. Our DNA is different. And you can't just write the same prescription for every single person every single time. It doesn't, you might see a little progress, but it'll plateau at some point. So that's kind of the gist of the long gist of collective health and wellness. We have a website. It's collectivehealthandwellness.com, and an Instagram handle, which is @collectivehw. And the easiest way to contact me there is Eamon @collectivehealthandwellness.com.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome. A super short website URL. That's great.
Yeah. It might be collectivehw.com. I think that's what it is.
Wow. I'll find it and put it in the show notes.
You can tell how often I go onto my website.
Yeah, well, even though you've been involved in so many entrepreneurial things, you're also so much an artist, and you're actually like providing the service. So like, yeah, it makes sense. You don't want to spend time in the techie stuff.
Yeah.
And so briefly on that, because I know that your clientele for collective health and wellness or like your target audience are employees of corporations, staff teams, or just employees in general. And so because you have so much experience in gyms with people who are athletes or people who are obviously going to a gym to get healthier, fitter, stronger, follow your prescriptions in the CrossFit realm, why are you now focusing on corporation employees?
Because the people that are going to go to gyms already have them, right? I don't need to worry about recruiting somebody. I don't need to worry about talking to somebody about the basics and how to like start into that. They're already there. They've already decided and made the choice to walk through the door. So the convincing is a lot less. The education, they typically come in with some form of education as it relates to health and wellness. So it's not like I have to win their business, but I don't have to explain to them why it's important, right?
Sure.
When it comes to people in the corporate world, we have a lot of I don't know how else to explain it. We have a lot of metabolic problems within this country, right? We're in the top 10 least healthiest countries in the world, and we have probably the highest GDP in the world, right? The average income of somebody living in India is 34,000, or pardon me, the upper class of India is $34,000, right? What's the poverty line in the United States? $36,000, right? So, and like, obviously things in the country are, we charge more, and, our economic growth depends on a lot of that stuff. But what I'm trying to get at is that we have access to all the right things, but for some reason people aren't taking advantage of it, right? Whether it's hard, whether it's they feel like they need to get fit before they start, which is always I'm always like blown away by that statement. I need to go to the gym before I start. It's like, what? Whether they feel like they don't have enough time, there's a lot of factors that come into play. But to me, that 98% of people that aren't regular participants in some kind of fitness regime that are surrounded by that kind of stuff, that's a huge market. And it's not a financial market. To me, it's a huge human value market, right? So improving people's lives, this might sound like I'm kind of full of myself or whatever, but I don't care about money. Money doesn't matter to me, right? Money comes and goes. And I know it's very easy for me to say that. I got a house, I got 2 kids, I got a wife, I got, I work my ass off, and so whatever, financial freedom is a nice thing, but money doesn't matter to me. What matters to me, and I know we'll get into this later, is the impact that I leave and the memory that people have of me when I'm gone, because we're all going to go, right? And I think that's way more important to me. It's way more important to me what people say about me at my funeral than talk about how much money I made in my life, right? And
Mhm.
so if I'm able to impact somebody's life in a positive nature, that's the impact I want to have. And the easiest way for me to do that is something like collective health and wellness, where I can take all those aspects and educate people and provide them with support in order to make better decisions for themselves, take their own life back, and not give it to somebody else or whatever to lead it for them, right?
Mm,
So
I love that. And
yeah,
we'll
sorry, that
definitely
that
tie
was a
back. Well,
bit of a rant, but
no, no, no. I didn't feel like it was a rant. You still like buttoned it up beautifully or like tied it up beautifully. So we'll definitely go back to the legacy piece for sure. Now, related to this, because I mean I met you in the CrossFit world, and you started, or at least your early part of your career was in the military for a time. And so obviously, or I should say, just like the social concept or like the social norm concept of military men, or military personnel in general, is of health and wellness, of just being really healthy. You need to be physically fit to be
you
in the
would think,
military. And
you
well,
would
I know
think,
that's the common perception. That's the
right?
common perception, that
Yeah.
like, you think of boot camp, like booty boot camp is like this new trendy thing now, but boot camp comes from military, so we automatically associate fitness levels with being in the military in some level. And so on some level you had to be fit and healthy to be in the military. Let's lay that out. And then
Yes.
I knew you in the CrossFit world, and then you started business in the CrossFit world, and now you have this corporate wellness thing. And so for you personally, you could have a legacy, or you could leave a powerful legacy and have an impact and make someone's life better in infinite kinds of ways. It doesn't need to be coaching your 4 tenets of wellness and health. So why for you are you so motivated by health and wellness being the avenue that you have an impact on people?
Man. I think even every philanthropic or every um, you know endeavor that people take, even if it is for other people, there's an aspect of that is pure selfishness, right? And that's not necessarily a negative thing, right? Like when you do something good for somebody, it makes you feel good. And sometimes like chasing that high is important to people. And to me, that is important. That's the high that I get off of that stuff. Um, you know, Seeing somebody accomplish a goal. I just got a text message from one of the clients from Collective Health and Wellness who I've been working with for a while, and she said, um, July of last year, she had a BMI of 49.6. She went into her doctor today and she has a BMI of 32, which for women, that's incredible. She's a
Mm.
she's a late 40s woman who has reduced her BMI, what is that? 17, almost 18%. Like, and I'm like, hell yeah. Like that's an awesome thing. And it makes me feel good. So, you know, I think there's a piece of it that is that aspect of chasing that high for myself. Um, I focus a lot on mental resilience because of the challenges I've had in my life. Before I joined the military, I had a lot of like, I had a crazy upbringing. I was a latchkey kid, which I don't think is a term anymore, but I'd come home from school, my parents wouldn't be home yet. Um, I was I had a brother and sister my brother wasn't around much. He had some learning difficulties, so that's a different story. But my sister was there, and we kind of had to fend for ourselves, right? I spent a lot of time outside as a kid. I played sports growing up. It was like, baseball and eventually ice hockey, which I played for a very long time. So I've always had this aspect of health, but from the mental health side of things, my experience in the military, I served in 2 combat zones during some pretty heavy fighting in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Um, you know, the mental resilience part is something that I've had to address pretty wholeheartedly. And for me, exercise has provided this outlet, the endorphin release, the structure that's surrounded by it, the feeling good about yourself and happy with like how you look,
Mm.
and like, you talk about confidence, like that's a huge confidence booster, right? um so that's the kind of the selfish part of why. And I just obsessed over it. I got so deep into it, and my thought process on a lot of this stuff changes constantly, as it should. At first it was like I'm looking at different training regimens and I'm trying to see what works best, and I'm trying things on myself, trial and error kind of stuff. And I mentioned it earlier, like now I dig a lot into like the hormonal aspect, and making sure your hormones are balanced, because they really do keep things in check. So I think that's why I feel it's important to educate people on the benefits of health and wellness, but not just at the surface level, to really get granular with it. I
Mm.
think it's super important. So
Yeah. Well, and that seems to relate to what you were saying before about, people who are coming into gyms. They don't really need the explanation as to why it's important to go into a gym. They just, you'll teach them kind of like how we're going to do it, blah blah blah. But it's almost like what you're talking about is your new target audience of these corporate employees, but also just kind of people in general that you might have the opportunity to educate. That's all the granularity you're talking about is what explains the why. Like that's kind of like filling in that gap of why it's important to focus on your health and wellness, because we all know it's important intellectually, but once it gets really real, like once you tell me, hey Taylor, your hormones are all messed up because of like how shitty your sleep schedule is, then it's like, oh gosh, then there's the emotion to it too.
yeah, I mean but that, once again, that's that basket we talk about. Everything is intertwined, right?
Yeah.
And it comes with food, it comes with exercise, it comes with sleep. There's this internal judging that we do, that's like, it's very easy, especially in the world of social media these days. It's very easy for us to like just look online and see somebody else who's posting their highlight reel of, how healthy they eat, how much sleep they get, blah 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 blah. But like, that's such a small fraction of their life. Like, um it's just, so then it creates like a little bit of like this self-judgment thing, like, oh, I need to sleep better, oh, I need to eat better, and blah 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 blah, without realizing that it's a process, and it's going to have its ups and downs. Like, you know there's time, I wear a Whoop, right? Keeps track of, and I wear it mostly for sleep tracking, and it does a pretty good job. But you know it can create a little bit of judgment sometimes when I look at it and I'm in the red and I'm like, "Buh," you know. But it to me, um, it's important to recognize and pay homage to the human aspect of who we are as people, right? It's so easy to forget that we are fallible. We are all capable of doing great things, and we're also all capable of doing some not so great things, and that's okay, because that's the human condition, right? So it's kind of my
Yeah.
input on that. Yeah.
Yeah, I like how you brought up the comparison piece, or just the self-judgment piece, because we, especially with social media these days, it's so easy, and conscious or unconsciously, to judge ourselves via comparison to who we see on Instagram. Even though, yeah, intellectually we know that bikini model has not been that happy every single day, or that guy in the gym didn't get such perfect sleep every night the past week or whatever. But so in terms of comparison and that self-judgment, you were saying, I mean, a lot of that can happen, especially in the fitness world. And your description of how you found sports, how you found fitness, how you found just overall health, nutrition, wellness seemed like a very kind of singular avenue for you, selfishly, in a good way, selfishly, not only to survive when you were younger, but also now to thrive, to continue thriving as you get older. And so, did you ever fall into the trap as you really got into fitness of comparing yourself to others, or has it always been just like a very singular track mind of like, nope, this is for me, and then eventually you would coach others? But like, your use of fitness, was it always just for you and you could keep that focus, or did you find yourself stuck in the trap of comparing and judging?
There's always there's even now, we're in week 3 of the CrossFit Open, and I intentionally am not hitting the Open hard this year, because as a masters athlete, the Open is kind of inconsequential. They take the top 10%. Um, and I could try to murder myself in these workouts over the course of 3 weeks and finish in the top 10 or top 5. But there's no payoff for me for that, if that makes sense. But it's still hard for me to look at the leaderboard and see that I'm in 136th place uh, in the world when I was at the CrossFit Games last year and I finished in 17th.
Mhm.
But so there's still that aspect. I like I was telling you earlier, I started playing hockey again, and my I played hockey for a very long time. I played hockey for 25 years. I played at a pretty high level. I played at prep school in high school. I played Division One after I got out of the military at the age of 30, which is kind of unheard of. Um, so I jumped back on the ice for the first time in 10 years in January, and my feet came back real quick, but my hands didn't. Right. And it's like people are passing me the puck, and it's just like hitting my stick and just bouncing off. Right. I can't receive a pass. I can't shoot. I can't do any of that stuff. And this is all stuff that used to be very easy for me. So, there was that comparison of like, hey, these other guys on my team are able to do all this stuff and I can't. But it comes back. For me, it came back. When it comes to nutrition, it's a constant mental struggle for me, because I fight with this aspect of like eating healthy, and eating enough, right?
Mm.
So my caloric intake is around 3,300 calories a day. Well, it's really hard to get 3,300 calories a day on sweet potatoes and broccoli. So sometimes I find myself eating a bowl of cereal at 10 o'clock at night, and that's okay. Right. Um, but giving yourself some grace, I think, is the most important aspect of that. And realizing that it's very easy to compare yourself to other people, but they're not experiencing your journey. We
Mm.
all live together on this planet, but we all travel this planet alone, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
In certain aspects, right?
Hmm.
So my experience can't be compared to somebody else's experience, because nobody's me, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's a really important Buddhist thought process on experience and on um, uh, uh, like the Buddhist religion focuses a lot on suffering, right? And somebody's experience, like, I said, I was in combat. I was in combat twice. And that's probably one of the hardest things I've ever had to do is you're in this constant state of, well, today could possibly be the day that I die. Eventually you just get used to that and you just kind of live your life anyway. But, for some people, the hardest thing that they've ever had to do was, I don't know, have surgery, right? They have a surgery and it kind of, and it's not my job to compare my combat experience with their experience of surgery. From the point of suffering, that is the highest level of suffering that they've ever had, and combat is the highest level of suffering that I've ever had. And that's what needs to be looked at, is to the individual experience. Those two things are equal. Doesn't matter who had it worse. It doesn't matter any of that stuff. Those two things are very equal because that is the highest level of suffering that they had. So it's unfair for me to say that I suffer more, that I've had greater tragedy in my life, right?
Yeah.
I don't think I think people do that comparison way too often to like, woe is me things. And it's like, I look at everything at this point in my life as either a success or an experience, right? There's no failure. There's no such thing as failure. There is only you win or you learn. It's very cliche to say that, but if you look at everything in a negative aspect and you are constantly trying to have a worse lifetime experience than other people through that, that's not a fulfilling life to me. It's like that's the constant state of comparison, right? At its most evil state. So
yeah,
once again, another rant, but I think there was a good little nugget in there. So.
There were numerous nuggets, don't worry.
Yeah.
What's profound about it though is when you say so clearly and so I should say so decisively too, that it's unfair for you to say that your suffering is more than someone else's suffering, even though those magnitudes and the context are totally different. You say that so decisively, almost like it's a logical truth. But I think what you're overlooking is how much humility is in that acknowledgement. Because there's so many people in the world who do get stuck in the comparison thing and find validation by saying, no, woe is me. My suffering is so much worse than so many others. And that's where they get fuel. But that's arrogance. That's like an entitlement, as though they're deserving of that validation through putting other people down. So
they're it's valid, right? Their experience is a completely valid experience, but it's the comparison part of that validation that I think needs to people need to withdraw from that. So I didn't mean to jump in there, but I think that's an important thing for people to understand.
No, for sure. That's okay, no problem. Yeah, and the point that I'm trying to make is related both not only to Buddhism, of course, but like all religious and spiritual faiths too, that you have to have this humility that you have come to, that you're a really great example of. You have to have that humility of, this is my life, this is this other person's life, we are in this world together, but I'm living my life independently and you're living yours independently. Let's figure out how we can both live well, right?
The freedom of thought that comes from, and that was that's still a constant iterative process for me to undertake, right? Like I still find myself sometimes in that comparison self, speaking poorly about myself. I still, there's those aspects are still there. It took me a long time to develop the skill set to not allow that to perpetuate, right? And the freedom that comes, like the psychological space that is opened up in my brain to deal with other things, because we only have so much capacity to deal with the shit of life, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm not worrying about like the minutia, I can worry about the bigger problems. I can worry about the more important aspects of life. I can worry about spending more time with my kids and being fully present with them, which is a super important thing to me.
Mhm.
You know, when we allow ourselves to to just live in this world of self-deprecation and self-hate, um, you know, that's you're not living quote unquote your best life at that point. So.
Yep. Well, we're going to stay on this for a second because I'm currently reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations.
Mm,
Finally, oh my god, I don't
mm,
know why it took me so long to
yes.
read this book, but I was just, and he repeats numerous times that nothing in the external world, like nothing tangible, no things can affect or touch your soul. All of your inner thoughts, in your judgments, discernments, self-talk, emotions or emotional interpretations, whatever, that's what affects the condition of your soul. And true wellness and well-being and just fulfillment, that's what really is what's nurturing and nourishes the soul. So if we want to get really spiritual, it's like the condition or state of your soul is kind of like indicative of your own mental health and the four tenets that you're talking about, just like how healthy is the body, how healthy is your nutrition, how healthy is your mental state, everything. And so I completely, so like when I read that, it hit home because I'm brutally self-critical. Like that's my biggest bugaboo to work on for throughout all of my life, just how hard I am on myself and how much I beat myself up. And self-compassion is the real goal. And so, like you said, getting out all of the minutia, freeing up that space, or at least just cleaning up the barragement on my soul of the self-talk, of the judgments, or of the little grinding self-criticisms, I can see how that would bring such massive mental space, mental freedom. And so have you, a lot of people who are listening to this, as well as a ton of my clients, almost all of them suffer from that same aspect of self-criticism, being really hard on themselves. Do you have an actual kind of mental cue that you practice now, or some
Oh,
kind of practice or habit that you
you
can
know I
teach
do.
and enlighten us, please?
Absolutely. So
Teach us your ways.
there's of all the experiences that we have in life, there are things that we have control over and things we do not have control over, right? Um, and the things that we do have control over are our thoughts and our actions, right?
Mhm.
The things that we don't have control over are what other people think of us, how other people react, how other people perform their daily lives. Those are all uncontrolled aspects. So when I'm experiencing a hardship, I tend to look inward and say, okay, what aspects of this can I control? And the real thing that it comes down to is that I can only control my thoughts, my words, and my actions. And that's a very Marcus Aurelius kind of thing, right?
Mhm.
The Stoics are, I think more people should read the Stoics, just because they got it right. You know,
Yeah.
they they worried about themselves, right? While still having compassion and empathy for other people. And understanding, there's layers here, right? Understanding that also my thoughts, my actions, and my words can also have an impact on other people's experience, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then realizing that, it's you got to check in with that, understanding what reactions that might have on other people. And then it's a decision of, am I okay with this or am I not okay with this? And once again, it goes back to that internal cycle of what can I control here? Right. So,
Yeah.
you know, that's it's an iterative process that takes constant work. Um, and sometimes I'm really successful with it, and sometimes I'm not. So, and giving
And
myself
so,
grace for that as well.
yeah, I mean, that's hard enough as it is, just giving ourselves grace. And so what is your, I mean, you might have said this, but what is the actual like mental exercise that you do? Just asking what are you in control of, or is it just
Correct.
an awareness technique?
It's asking what I'm actually in control of.
Okay.
Yep. And the one thing that out of all those aspects, the one thing that we're mostly in control of is our thoughts and our reaction to things. Right.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. I really appreciate that you talked that through and brought it up, because I just made a podcast episode about that, just myself speaking a few weeks ago, about how we can train ourselves sort of to like kind of have control over our emotions, and how we might, like, we can decondition and recondition how we feel about things. But really, all day, every day, all that we have control over is our thoughts, actions, and reactions to those emotions. And what you said, what other people are doing, right? So that's what we have control over. And so I really appreciate that you gave an actual tangible example of what you do on a daily basis, because I've read books on self-compassion, and there's so many different mindfulness tricks and things like that. But I know at the end of the day, it comes down to figuring out what works for you, and having the humility, like you said, to remember that it's a constant iterative process, that it can't just be done in your morning routine and think that you're good for the day.
you can't just flip the switch on and it's good for the day and then it resets at night. That's not how that works.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Totally. I love it. So this sort of plays into another question that I had. So we might as well just stay on this for a minute. Because of the fact that when I met you, and then as I've had the privilege and honor of getting to know you more, the thing that so impressed on me about you was your confidence and the way you carry yourself. And you just come across as such an incredibly mature, confident, self-assured person. And
Trick is
but
working.
yeah, exactly. You must be an Oscar level actor then.
Yeah.
Uh, so it may be related to what we're just talking about, but because of the fact that I know you on an intimate level too, I know things you've struggled with, I know just the trajectory of your career and things. What would you say is an insecurity of yours that you struggle the most with, that you feel comfortable talking about?
I'm an open book. I feel comfortable talking about anything. So there's nothing that's off the table for me. Um, I think there's layers to that as well, right? Because it ebbs and flows. Um, Separation from the military for me. I
Say
had
that
a
one more
really
time. You cut just a little bit.
Yep. Sorry. I'll try and bring the mic closer.
It's okay.
Separating from the military was a really hard experience for me because it was who I was. It identified as somebody who served in the military for such a long time.
Mm.
And that was my mission, right? Previous to that, I joined the military because um, I was kind of just floating. I didn't really have a goal. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with myself. I was like, I wasn't getting in trouble, but I was on a road to nowhere pretty fast. And it would be a lot of like wasted talent, I guess. And everybody has wasted talent, right? Like,
Mm.
it just depends on how, once again, you react to that stuff. Either way, so when I got out of the military, it was trying to find a new mission. And a lot of people talk about
Mm.
that. And the loss of the tribe of like-minded people who were in the military, who have gone through those experiences, who have gone through that indoctrination process, because it is an indoctrination process. And, you know, all of a sudden I'm back out in the civilian world. I got out of the military in December of 2008. I got back from Afghanistan in September of 2008. You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
it
wow.
was a very quick reintroduction back to civilian life. My brain was still fighting a war. So,
Wow.
and
Jeez.
I was back in college starting in January. So it was just yeah, it was like drinking from a fire hose at first, right? So,
God.
finding a new mission was my top priority at that point. And my whole goal was I was going to get out of the military because I had a very high op tempo when I was in the military. I needed a little bit of time to decompress a little bit and finish my education. And then I was planning on going right back in, going through BUDS, becoming a Navy SEAL, and continuing on with my mission. Just because that's what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
Then I met my wife, and everything changed. So, for the better, right? Um, Meeting Emmy gave me a new appreciation for the new life that I was in,
Mm.
a new sense of stability. Um, and, that was something that was very important to me at the time. And it still
Mm.
is. Like, it's still very important to me. So, and even now, I mean, I think the thing that I struggle with most now is, um, it's very easy for somebody to pretend like they know everything. Um, but I'm in constant fear that, like, imposter syndrome, right? Like, people are gonna
Mm.
find me out. Like, I don't have a background in health and wellness. My degrees in I have an MBA. Everything that I go through, I've taken a lot of courses. I've coached a lot of people. Um, you know, I pertain or I adhere to the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours approach of things, and I definitely have done my 10,000 hours of coaching. So I do feel like I'm an expert when it comes to coaching. Um, but with the health and wellness stuff, it's like I'm afraid that people are going to find out that, like, oh, he doesn't actually know what he's talking about. Oh, he's a sham. Oh, this is all like a ploy to make money. And oh, it's like, so there is like a constant battle that I have with imposter syndrome. I mentioned the CrossFit Games last year, right? I was fortunate enough to perform well enough that I made it to the highest level of our sport. Um, I still think it was an accident, right?
Yeah.
So, it's like, but once again, like, every once in a while, it just comes down to having that pep talk with myself of like, no, you belong there. You're there for a reason. You worked really hard. You spend a lot of time and money on education. You are constantly trying to learn. And then you get messages like from this person, and I'm like, you know, I really am making an impact on people, and that's important to me.
Mhm.
Um, as it relates to confidence, I don't know. I think a lot of that comes from the military, my experience in the military, because there's a certain sense of bravado that you kind of have to have,
Mm.
uh, to you know. I volunteered to go to Afghanistan. I volunteered to go to Iraq. I didn't have to go to either one of those places, but I wanted to. It's like my trial by fire, right? I wanted to do something really hard, that could turn out potentially very poorly. To have that experience, um, to somewhat make other things in life easier, if that makes sense.
That answered my next question. Yep,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. I like doing things the hard way.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, you like challenging yourself also.
yeah. I mean, yes, I like doing things the hard way because I feel like if I do hard shit, um, other things are just easy,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
So
Which correlates both to something I think it was Joe Rogan said, as well as I think it's a motto in the Navy SEALs too. The Navy SEAL quote is like, the only easy day was yesterday.
Yeah.
So it's that constant mindset of just continuing to challenge yourself harder than you did yesterday. Um, and then I think it was Joe Rogan who was talking about intentional suffering, as in like intentionally pushing yourself harder than you did the day before, whether it's in a workout or a hike or a run or whatever, so that everything you do the rest of the day seems a whole lot easier. You've already made yourself suffer so much, so physically, spiritually, emotionally, whatever, that the rest of the day seems easier.
Yeah, I just read a book. Well, I listened to a book called The Comfort Crisis, and it
Mm,
specifically talks about doing hard things. I think that these guys, like, they went on a hunting trip in Alaska for like 4 or 6 weeks or something like that, with like only the stuff on their backs, and like that was a very intentional thing for them to do. Um,
mhm.
and I think seeking out those challenges, both physically and intellectually, and putting yourself out of your regular comfort zone. Um, you know, Coach Glassman from CrossFit, love him or hate him, he's got some good nuggets that he's put out, and one of them is we fail at the margins of our experience,
Mm,
and that's not to say that failing
mm.
is a bad thing. What that's saying is that in order for us to keep progressing in whatever we're trying to progress in, you have to butt up against those margins, right?
Absolutely.
In order to push those margins out, so that when hard shit comes up, it's easier to deal with.
Mm. Yeah. I literally just recorded a webinar last night where I talked about how when you push out of your comfort zone, yes, you feel like you're in a new land, like you're in no man's land, but not only do you like to learn what like the limits of your fear are and your fears, but you also get to realize what new skills and abilities are needed immediately in that new
Right.
land, right?
Yes.
So all of a sudden new skills just like show themselves, or you have to adapt, right? And what's cool about that is that not only is the realm in which you're operating new, but you have new skills. So no matter which realm you're in, you have new skills and things are going to be easier because you've just acquired new abilities.
Yep. And then you can take those new abilities and also apply them to experiences that you already have, and try and broaden those experiences. It's an iterative
Exactly.
process. Yeah. But like when you break it down like that, it's such a like the human condition is such a cool freaking thing, man. And like you can't take any experience for granted.
No,
Yeah.
no, you really can't. And going back to Stoicism and Buddhism to an extent, I mean, both Marcus Aurelius and Alan Watts have like quotes about how all that's knowable and controllable is the present. And so our human condition is like all the infinite possibilities of the universe are happening right now, or are available right now, I should say. And
Right now.
Alan Watts, yeah,
And right
right now,
now.
now,
And
right
right
now,
now. And right now. Yeah.
yeah, Alan Watts said that too. Of just like it's not about a second ago, because now that's the past, and like it all starts now, and that's what we can focus our attention on. And not to say we should neglect our past or not identify with it completely, but there's so much to be realized in the present, which is what we're talking about. The iterative process of the human condition means that this moment can constantly be different and new and better and healthier and happier. Yeah.
I notice this a lot with my boys. Um, I have two young kids, and Orion is just like this, like, super smart spitfire of a kid. He's got so much intelligence. He's got so much love to give. He's just like a fantastic. I mean, you met Orion. You met him when he was a
Mm-hmm.
baby, but
You still had
um,
personality then.
he, yeah, and like but like for me as his dad, it's like you know, this morning, I'll never have another morning like this morning was. And I'll
Mm,
never have another morning like tomorrow morning was. And I'll never have another morning like 2 days ago was. And like being present for those moments and like you know, I'm not always fully present because I don't think you can be necessarily, but like
sure.
recognizing that and then stepping back from whatever I'm doing and really taking that moment in has been an awesome experience for me. Um, I took myself off social media for the month of February, and whew, man, was that like a cleansing process, right? Because I felt like I was more available to my kids at that point, and I was more available to my wife, and I was more available to my clients, and I was more available to other people. Um, you know, being able to connect with people again is in a non-digital world is something that I think we need to work on as a race. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
And that could be it. That'll be the topic for part 2
Okay,
episode.
sounds great.
But that's so true.
Yeah.
So true. And interestingly, so the next question that I had for you, and this, I like that, I'm going to explain the segue in a second, was what you brought up about the imminent possibility of death earlier. Because what's interesting, what I just connected to when you were talking about the reveling of the moments with your children, of just knowing, oh my gosh, I'm only going to have this one moment once with your son. Now that yesterday was my mom's 2-year death anniversary. And so, because of the fact that I don't have kids, um, I think about moments with my mom and remember those moments as those moments like you are having with your kids. So it's very much like this life and death thing. Like those are the categories, but we're really thinking the same thing of like, those are moments of presence that act as examples for me for how to be present in a moment, especially now with my fiance. Like I had a moment like you just described with your son this morning. I had a moment this past week with my fiance that was like a fully encapsulated, like, wow, we're sitting here, this is a present moment, and I could like truly cherish it, even though we weren't doing anything, we're just sitting there. But for some reason it was like that moment where I was like, wow, the beauty of this moment is only happening right now.
I have two moments like that with you.
Oh, stop it.
No, I do. The dinner that we had out in Salt Lake City,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I very distinctly I remember what I had there. That was I remember what we talked about, you know. Um, and then there was a moment when we were both in Boston that you and I just went out and got coffee
Yep.
at the Starbucks down the street, and that was like I think for me, for our relationship, that's something that solidified our relationship for me was that one moment in time. But it's a moment that I cherish, right? And it's a moment like, and having those moments, I think, well, we can get down the road of like technology and like the issues that causes. We can go on a metabolic standpoint on that one as well.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of us are kind of like missing each other, even though we're very present with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we're missing the opportunity to live a very full life because of those missed opportunities, right? Because we've got our head in a phone or we're working on something or, you know, we just don't get together and just like talk anymore, right? We
Yeah.
don't get together and just like and like be in the presence of other people anymore, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that's hard, ironically challenging about living in New York City is that there are millions of people around me, but it's very hard to actually meet people.
yeah, you're very
you know?
alone,
Yeah, it's really weird.
surrounded by millions, but totally alone.
Yeah. But I I mean, firstly, that just means so much to me that those two experiences that we had together meant so much to you. And I
Yeah.
think very often about our when we went out for coffee too. And the funny thing, the reason why I'm chuckling about that is because I remember initiating that. I remember inviting you to go get coffee or just go talk somewhere else. And my excuse was because you had just mentioned that you were like starting businesses and like you were in the business world, and I had already started my business. And I was so in awe of you just as a person. I just thought you were such a cool person, such a cool person to be around, that I could learn so much from, that I was like, secretly, I was like, I just want to get to know this dude. Like, I want to be friends with him. But I remember inviting you to coffee under the guise of asking you about business and your career, thinking like, I don't know if this guy's like, if this guy could make time for me or time to be my friend or something, or if we just need to talk about business for it to be worth it for him. But I remember you were so kind and so generous with your time. And we sat and we talked not only about business, but we talked about life and your
Yeah,
career and family and everything. Yeah, that absolutely stands out to me too.
yeah, that was a good coffee date.
Yes, very good
Yeah,
conversation, as is
yeah.
always the case with you. Um, so which further motivates me to ask this deeper question, just because I'm really curious about your insight on it. What you said earlier about being, excuse me, I'm going to cough. What you said earlier about how in the military you were constantly facing this mentality of, oh gosh, I could die any second. And at a certain point, you just kind of had to settle with that, or just kind of like adjust or get used to that. Firstly, so this is a two-part question. So once you actually adjusted to that in the military, was that any kind of like motivator? Like, did that help you be really present in the moment and like get the most out of the experience? Or was that like a situation like, for lack of better words in clinical terms, learned helplessness, where you're just like, well, this is it. I'm just going to keep doing what I have to do. And then the second part to that question, before you answer that, is, has that mindset about death and that we could die anytime impacted you or affected you or continue to motivate you in any kind of conscious way throughout the rest of your career since then?
Yes, in two different aspects. Um, I think my specifically my experience in Afghanistan, because it was a little bit more in depth than my experience in Iraq. Um, I think that's when I started really focusing in on stoicism.
Mm.
Um, and there's an old saying, memento mori, and it's like,
Yeah.
it's once again, it's one of those cliche things, but it's like the thought process of remember that you're going to die, right? Um, None of us escape that. Not a single person in the history of ever has ever escaped death. Um, and there's two aspects you can use with that. There's two ways you can go with that. One, that learned helplessness. You can be like, well, it is what it is, and I hate that statement to no end. Um, it is what it is, and what will be, and yada yada yada. Because that means you have no control, right? You've relinquished
Yeah.
control of those things that we talked about earlier. And the other side of that coin is, you can look at it as an opportunity, right? Which is how I prefer to look at it as.
Mhm.
Um, you know, as I mentioned to you before, the two things that are most important to me at this point, specifically since becoming a father the first time, and then even more so becoming a father the second time, is leaving a legacy and an impact for not just my boys, but for myself, right? And that's the selfish aspect of that. Um, I don't want people to talk about how much money I made, or any of those other aspects when they're standing over my coffin and I'm laying there, whatever. Um, I won't be in a coffin. I want to get cremated, but either way, um, I don't want them to talk about that stuff. I want them to talk about how I made them feel or what impact I had on their life. And that's a huge motivator for me. Now it's like our time on this earth is so finite, like so finite, and with the speed of life these days, how fast information is coming at us, how fast things are happening around us. um, it just accelerates that timeline a little bit. Yeah, we're living longer than our grandparents did potentially, but the information and the life aspect of that is coming at us at an exponentially faster rate. Not
Mhm.
just 1x or 2x. I'm talking like 300x. I can I can go to this thing and pull up whatever I want, any information that I want, about anything in the world, right?
Mhm.
Um, and then I have to go through the process of, is this factual or not factual, because the internet's a dangerous place.
Sure.
But I think if you look at it from that memento mori standpoint of remembering that you're going to die, um, I think I think you can have a greater impact of what your legacy is going to be, right? Um, the other
Nice.
the other saying is amor fati, which is love your fate.
Oh yeah, I just
Yeah,
heard that for the first time just recently.
yeah, and loving your fate is another thing that you can. That's a little bit more of a positive turn. Um, there was a veteran, a Marine veteran that I know. He's passed away since, but he had his leg blown up in Afghanistan, um, and he had a Morfati tattooed to his knuckles,
Mm.
and he truly lived that. He truly lived that aspect. Um, you know, your your fate. It sounds like something you might not have control over, um, but once again, you have control over your thoughts, your actions, and your reactions to things. And if you look at everything as an aspect of, it's you win or you learn, I think it's a lot easier to love your fate that way.
So well said. Nice. Thank you. And this ties really nicely into the last question that I like to ask people, and I know you've already put some thought into it. So for those of you who have not listened to my podcast before, what I normally do as the last question is I explain, or I have this one question, and it is the context of it is that my godfather was a really acclaimed pediatrician, and he would teach a lot of incoming medical students on a lot of things related to like proper medical practice and all this. And he would hold events and like invite other doctors in at his house, bring a bunch of med students in, have these little events. And there was one time where all the med students were asking all sorts of nitty gritty logistical, like best practice. Is this right? Is this wrong? Like kind of questions. And whoever was speaking just stopped them and said, find the definition of a good life. Like find your definition of a good life. And whatever you think your definition of a good life is, make your decisions based on that, because it'll come from a much more authentic place of empathy and love and care instead of what you read in a textbook. Right. And so I always ask that. I know I preambled it to you before we got on, and you brought up having a positive impact and legacy. And you've mentioned it several times throughout this episode. And so the one really specific question I have in relation to this is for you personally, because you've already explained generally why impact and legacy are important, why what's motivated you throughout your lifetime to even care about having an effect on other people. And so why do you think legacy and impact is like the thing to aim for? Why does it matter as like the ultimate goal in your mind?
Well, I think so. All these aspects, I think my life, I've lived my life and um, done things in what's called servant leadership. In that I am here to serve others. That is in my DNA.
Mm,
I will I could have $0 and I know that I will find a way to serve other people in some aspect, because once again, that's my selfishness, because it makes me feel good, right? um, I would say that the reason why legacy is so important to me now is my boys. I want to provide a good example for them, because that is how you improve the world, right? And like, we're in a pretty interesting time in history right now, right? Um, I'm not going to say that it's worse than any other time in history, because I don't know that for a fact. But I would say it's a very challenging time, at least in my lifetime. Um, all the things that are going on in the world, from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, to the coronavirus, to what's going on currently in Ukraine with Russia, and they've got their finger on the nuclear trigger again, and that's a scary aspect. Though I don't think that they don't want that smoke. Trust me. Um, but the legacy that I want to leave for my boys is a legacy of that servant leadership and love. Um, I see it in Orion, and it's such an amazing thing to see it in such a young kid. He just loves everybody relentlessly, right? He just is like, and I think that might be the innocence of children, but like, everything he does is out of love. Um, and I think if we, as a human race, look at children as the example, I think we'll get along a lot better. But my legacy and impact that will be long lasting isn't going to be, I'm not going to engineer something that's going to cure cancer. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. But what I can leave is an example of how to serve others without expecting anything in return. And I think that's such an important aspect that this world is missing right now, because everybody wants something in return for that, when not understanding that the return is the act. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Have you read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
Mhm.
All right, I bring it up multiple times per month. Like, it's just such a powerful book. But he said that you're only entitled to the labor, and that's where the reward has to come, because you're not actually entitled to this external thing that's given to you as a reward, because that can be taken away. That can be, someone can choose to not pay you for your services, right? So
Right.
you're only entitled to the labor, and that's the service and that's the impact that we can leave. I love it. That was awesome. Really appreciated that explanation. I think that was really impactful for me, and I think that it's really impactful in a very like clear, concise, human way of setting an example. For some reason, like, I haven't heard about legacy as setting an example, or just put in those plain terms, but like, that's really what it is. It's like teaching a way that we not only can be healed as a people and helped as a people, but then what that can do for communities, for countries, for the entire world, all of the problems that we could list off.
Yeah. I mean, look at some of the most successful people in the history of ever, right? At least modern history, right? Let's talk about people like, you know, politics aside, because I don't think they have any place in this conversation, but like people like Elon Musk, people like Bill Gates, people like um, Richard Branson, people like, uh, I just finished listening to Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, the
Mm,
founder of Nike. Like, all of those people started their businesses not with a focus on money and making money, but instead on providing something that would leave their legacy. And then when they became successful in whatever they did, you know, Phil Knight, for example, has this bad thought that he, is using child labor in China, right? That was like a bad publicity thing that happened in like the early 90s, early or late 90s, early 2000s.
Mhm.
Well, child labor is legal in China. You know what he did instead that people didn't talk about is he improved the conditions for those kids and for those employees that are working over there. And like, it's so easy just to look at the negative aspect of what he did. It's so easy to look at, Elon Musk and think that he's like this evil person. The dude just sent one of his satellites over top of Ukraine so they have access to Wi-Fi.
I know.
Like, are you kidding? So they can actually like communicate with the world because Russia's shut them out. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, and you're gonna say this guy is an evil genius? Come on, man. Like, so, you know, I invite people to look deeper into the impact that people are leaving and not just look at their money and be jealous. Right?
Yeah.
Look at the things that they're doing to improve the lives of others.
Yeah. Which is a really nice bow to tie on this episode, because that connects, it's focusing more on the impact and legacy versus the comparison and criticism and self-judgment piece.
100%. Yep. Yeah. Well done.
You too.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Eamon, thank you so much for being here. As I say with all of my guests, I really would love to do a part 2 at some point, because there's so much more we can talk about. Thank you for being so generous with your time and coming on today.
I love seeing your face, man. So
love seeing your face too.
Yeah, you live 40 minutes away from me. I haven't seen your face in like 3 years. So
I know. Well, that's what happens when you become a double father.
Oh man. Feel free to come and take the children whenever you want.
Thank you. You also are like starting businesses every few months, so yeah. It's not like you're just sitting around at home waiting for me to come hang out.
We are always welcome
here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, I will put all links and everything to everything that you're doing with Collective Health and Wellness in the show notes. If anybody who's listening to this would like to get in touch with Eamon to talk about anything of the four pillars or anything that we talked about today, because he's just so kind and so generous and so smart and thoughtful and humble and intelligent and awesome. So please
keep going.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just off the cuff. I didn't even prepare those compliments. But if you are interested in getting in touch with Eamon, I'll put everything in the show notes. And again, Eamon, thank you so much. It's so good to see you.
You too, buddy.